Hello and welcome to the third part of our lecture on ethics. In the previous part, we discussed the difference between morality and ethics, but also how morals are involved in ethics and how they are both based on decision making, how they both are connected to decision making. Now, to illustrate the difference between morality and how to integrate moral viewpoints into ethical guidelines, we'll discuss a very specific problem, a very specific ethical or moral dilemma, if you wish, and that dilemma is called the trolley problem. So the trolley problem is what we're going to discuss today, and it's like a thought experiment, right? It's not an experiment that you would physically do because it in itself would be for most people probably immoral and for us as scientists definitely unethical to do so. So what does the trolley problem look like, right? Like, let's say you have a hypothetical situation where you are next to a train track and you see that a train is running over the tracks and is going to kill 5 people that are bound to the tracks and have no means of escaping. So meaning that if you won't do anything, the train cannot stop in time anymore and will definitely kill those 5 people. However, you have the power to pull a switch, divert the train onto another track where there's only one person laying that's also bound to the track that will also die. So what to do in this type of situation? So to come up with some ethical guidelines on how to act in this type of situation, you have to take into account different moral viewpoints to this problem. And most people would probably adhere to the utilitarianism point of view. Now, that is a very pragmatic point of view where you say, like, you know what, I'm going to pull the switch. It's easy for me. I mean, there's 5 people going to die. If I don't act, the train is going to run over those 5 people. If I do act, only one person dies. It's a no-brainer. I'm going to do this. And not only is that permissible that I do this, it's even morally obligated because I'm around there. I have a potential influence on the outcome, so I can save these 5 people. So I am participating anyway, like it or not. So I have to pull the switch because if I don't pull the switch, I also make a decision and I decide to kill these 5 people. Now, this is one moral viewpoint of looking at things. Some alternative viewpoints can be, you know what? I'm not God. I'm not the judge that decides who is to live or die. The harm has already taken place and I'm not responsible for it. So once I'm going to intervene, I'm playing a role and I actively partake in harm doing and I decide to kill that one person and not the 5 others. So morally, I can't justify that for myself because I am going to actively kill somebody and I don't want to do that. And then there is the principle of the incommensurability of human lives. Why is one person less valuable than the other 5? Let's say if that one person is a single father raising 5 children and they financially depend on them. So now you're not destroying one life, you're destroying 6 lives. And what if the other 5 people are terminally ill? Or what if, for instance, these are 5 killers? Again, how would that reflect on your decision making? And you don't know that beforehand. So the harm you might actually be doing really by intervening actively might be less or might be bigger than you thought at first, while not intervening might have less of an impact than you thought before. So these are other viewpoints that you need to take into account when coming up with ethical guidelines to determine what a person should do in a certain situation. And it shows you that boundary conditions are important. And there is a small variation on the trolley problem, and that variation is called the fat man. Again, it's a thought experiment, so don't take this too seriously. But let's say you're on a bridge, right? You see the train coming, 5 people are going to die. You think like I can stop the train, maybe I jump in front of it, but I don't have enough mass. The train will run me over and will kill me and the 5 other people. Now, next to you, there's a very, very fat guy that you know has enough mass, and when you would push that guy onto the tracks, that would be enough mass to hit the train, make the train brake, and stop in time to save the 5 people. Now, I know in real life you could never ever know for sure that the train is going to stop, and you would like rather sacrifice yourself or something like that. But let's say that that's not possible. It's a thought experiment. We're not ethically allowed to do this type of experiments. We're not going to do it. But let's say that this is the case. Now, people that adhere to utilitarianism, which are usually most people in the previous trolley problem, would no longer do that because although the result is the same, I push this guy onto the tracks and I save 5 people by sacrificing one. Now people would be less inclined to do so because they feel like they're now actively killing the person by pushing it on the tracks. The result is the same, the means are different. Most people would oppose now while they would pull the switch previously. So now you have a situation where you feel that you're actively, like I said, actively killing somebody rather than it being a side effect of a decision you make. But still, it would be essential to save others. But people will be less inclined to do so. Again, some alternative hypotheses or some alternative viewpoints or elements to take into account. What if the fat guy is, for instance, the guy that actually bound the other people to the track? What if you're not entirely sure the train will stop? So there are a lot of boundary conditions, and this shows you that ethics is really complicated. So it's philosophy in one way, like looking at moral viewpoints, studying them, trying to give weight to certain viewpoints, but it's also science, like how are we going to integrate all these moral viewpoints into ethical guidelines? And this example shows you that it's not so easy, right? Like there is the looking at simply like what are you doing and how are you doing it, but also why are you doing it is important, and can you do it in another way? Is it possible to minimize damage, for instance, when you're using animal models to study a certain disease? So these boundary conditions are extremely important for coming up with ethical guidelines because they help you to make some common ground between these different moral viewpoints to come up with a solution that's acceptable on a much bigger level than when just picking one moral viewpoint and making that the ethical guideline. Thank you for your attention.